Today I'm going to turn a silver maple bowl down to a rough out stage, like this bowl. Then I'll take this honey locust bowl that's already dry and I will complete it. And before I move on to actual bowl turning, I want to talk about the history of the gouges that I'm going to use, and they are actually based on spindle turning techniques. So when we're talking about spindle turning, we're talking about the grain running parallel to the lathe. So as you can see with this branch, the bark is facing me and underneath the bark is side grain. At the end of the branch, we can see we've got end grain. Just like this spindle block, we've got end grain, side grain, parallel to the piece. When we bowl turn, we take the piece of wood, because it's a side grain bowl, and we spin it. And therefore, the cuts change direction, but we can use some of the same tools between spindle and bowl. So let's talk about the tools. So here I've got a spindle roughing gouge. Now, it's called a spindle roughing gouge because it can only be used on a spindle. It can't ever be used on a bowl. There are simply too many risks of something going wrong with it because it can grab into the end grain. For the case of using a similar cut, we use a bottom bowl gouge, and you can see they're similar in profile. I'm using a U-shaped. Bottom bowl gouge doesn't have a tang. It's much stronger. It's a longer tool. It's smaller in size. And when we move away from the side grain, when we're cutting through the side grain to leave end grain, we're using slicing tools. And that would be my 40-40 gouge or my spindle gouge. Now, obviously, the spindle gouge here is pretty small and meant for light work. When we're doing the bulk of removing of the wood, we're using the 40-40 gouge here. So now I'm going to take these two particular tools and use them on the spindle block and show you the history of the bottom bowl gouge and the 40-40. So we'll eliminate the parts we don't need right now. Now, before I turn this particular piece, if I go back to my 7 fundamentals, first of all, we have to understand about grain direction. So now the grain direction on this particular piece is parallel with the lathe. It's not a bowl blank. And then, secondly, we need to know that we're chucked on the lathe correctly. So here I'm between a 4-prong drive center and a live center. Third is to make sure that my tool is the correct tool. I'm going to use a spindle roughing gouge to take this down to the round. It's already been pre-sharpened, and I've selected a handle length that's suitable for this. After that, I need to set my tool rest to make sure it's at the correct height. And most of the time when we're cutting with a gouge, the tool rest is slightly below center. I usually use a pencil as a reference. If the gouge is really big, as in a big bowl gouge, I'll drop it slightly further. But for this, we're set here. I've set my tool rest parallel and reasonably close. Not too close that I have to engage the cut before the tool's on the tool rest. From here, I'm going to set my speed. So we'll start off slow with modern variable speed. I can build my speed up. I'm going to take this up to about 1800 RPM. And then from here, what I want to be doing is when I'm cutting this piece, I want to stand at the end of the cut here with my feet parallel to the cut. By being parallel to the cut, I can just move my body from side to side to get a parallel cut. I have body contact with the handle, and I'm going to lift the tool into the cut because I'm doing a peeling cut. I'm peeling side grain. I'm not interacting with end grain. So starting off the end here, making sure the tool is on the tool rest. Coming in, I'm lifting in and just peeling away with the flute facing away from me. And you can see these are very rapid cuts. This is pure peeling. So in spindle turning, this is very rapid. Here I'm going to go back and forth. And then to get it down finally to the round, I'll traverse in both directions. For the last cut, I'll just simply slow down. This is peeling. We're looking to create the same cut when we're bowl turning on the bowl blank. But before I move on from there, I'm going to talk about the 40-40 gouge. Now the 40-40 gouge is great at peeling, but it doesn't give us a good finish on the surface. What it's better at is slicing through the side grain, creating end grain. So I'm going to take my second block and I'm going to show the pummel cut. And that's the reason the 40-40 gouge was developed, was to do rapid pummel cuts using a gouge rather than a skew. So I'm going to set up for that right now. So instead of starting with the spindle roughing gouge, I need to create myself a pummel. A pummel is the section between the square and the round. It exposes end grain, and it's one of the few cuts in wood turning that we don't ever sand. So when I made balustrades and no posts for a living, I never sanded the pommel, so it had to be my very best cut. And over the years, I would always do that cut with a skew chisel. The problem with the skew was it was slow because a skew is a slicing tool. Slicing tools take small volume, but with this, I can actually slice and peel at the same time. So this is a double action tool. By being 40 and 40, that is a 40-degree bevel, a 40-degree wing, and when we sharpen this and create one later on the grinder, then I'll explain that in more detail. But this allows me to cut into this block of wood rapidly and take large volume cuts. So here, instead of being parallel to the cut, I'm going to put my left leg forwards, and I don't need to support the tool on the tool rest too much because it doesn't skid on entry on a broken surface. And this is a pommel cut. I'm just lifting in to the corners. So here I'm just showing off the end. You can see I can take very large volume. And in 2 cuts, I've created a pommel off the end. Now, normally pommels aren't on the end of the block, so I'll show how I create the pommel in the center. You can see, though, we have a great finished surface here on the end grain, but this gouge does a really poor job of the side grain. That's when a side grain peeling tool is used. So this is excellent at removing side grain, excellent at leaving end grain exposed, but it is not good at finishing side grain. It's not a side grain finishing tool. So let's do the cut further back. So let's pull into the piece and show you how rapidly we can cut this back. So we can keep cutting back in massive amounts of volume. So I'm able to take almost ½ an inch a pass. So you can see how effective this tool is at removing bulk. And I'm ignoring the side grain material here in front of it, because I'm going to remove that now with a spindle roughing gouge. Now for spindle roughing gouges, they're always used square to the work. So what I mean by that is if I put angle on this tool, I can't get into the corner. It's got square corners, and if I use it square to the lathe, then I can get that square corner into that corner without picking up a third tool. So from here, again, low handle for this cut, I'm just leveling off the tops. And so you can see on this spindle block, it's a combination of side grain and end grain. So by being side grain and end grain, I'm using one tool to finish the side grain and a different tool to finish the end grain. And this is the relation we will see when I make the bowl, is that we have side grain and end grain on a bowl, and therefore we need 2 types of tool. We're not trying to make the whole system here, the 2 cuts with a single tool. We're trying to use the correct tool for the end grain and the correct tool for the side grain. So here I'm going to take the silver maple bowl, I'm going to mount it between centers. Now this is not ideal in the sense that I'm not going to do any shaping of the bowl whatsoever between centers. All I'm going to do is prep it ready to fit on an expansion chuck, which I have here, and I'm going to fit it on the largest jaws possible. So from here, I'm going to take it up. I've already marked the center. My tailstock is locked. I'm going to put it on there, and then I'm going to wind this in. Now as you can see, as I wind it in, we can truly see that that is not going to work. So all I'm going to do here is keep it on the same point and level it up till it's workable. So a little bit of sliding down, pinch again, check again. We're looking pretty good, so lucky on the second try there. We'll stop that. And then I'm going to wind this in very tight, making sure this is also locked. And what I'm looking to do is get the teeth on this 4-prong drive center, which is a big drive center, to bed in. I also give it a little twist and bed it in again. Little twist, make sure it's bedded. You can also use big drive centers like this. This one has 2 adjustable points. This is really big. This is also be very successful. And if you're a little bit nervous about imbalance and problems with it, you can also drill a hole in this side of the bowl, because this is the bowl side I'm going to hollow out. So right now this is the top of the bowl. So if you want to get more location, but as you can see, pretty soft maple, my drive center is dug into there really well. We're good to go. Now it's really important to lock this here, because this is going to lock the quill. If I don't lock the quill, it'll rock inside there and I'll lose a little bit of my support. So locking this is also important. Now, I'm not going to shape or take it down to the round or do any manipulation of the blank other than leveling the face and putting a recess in there to expand my dovetail jaws. So no shaping it, because I don't want to stand in front of the blank, and no doing any of taking it down to the round other than prepping it to get on a chuck. Once it's on a chuck, it's very safe, and whilst it's on the chuck, I'll also use the tailstock for a little bit longer, but let's get it to that position. So setting my tool rest up just a little bit below center, checking that I'm clear all the way around. I've also got my speed way down. I was spindle turning a minute ago and the speed for spindle turning was much higher. Now with a blank like this, I don't want to take the speed over 1,000 RPM no matter what, no matter how small the blank is when I'm prepping. And on this blank being a bit bigger than some, I'm going to take this one up to around about 800. And all I'm going to do is prep the face, put a recess in. To put the recess in, I'm going to use a little scraper here with a 10-degree angle on the face. That's going to match the 10 degrees that I have on my dovetails. And I'm going to cut downhill when I'm scraping there. But before I do that, I need to get the face leveled. But let's just quickly go back to the spindle roughing gouge. At this point, this gouge can never be used in any position on the bowl, outside, inside. So I'm just going to eliminate this from the process. I'm not going to use it at all. I'm just going to remove it from the scene. So we're going to start with the 40-40 gouge here. And using a 20-inch handle, I'm going to lock this in. And I'm going to position my left leg forwards because I'm going to have my left arm forward. It's a straight cut with body contact. And I'm just going to traverse back and forth, getting this down to a nice level surface. It's not going to give me a great finish, but this surface is not a finished surface at this point. But what it's going to do is going to level it very quickly with a peel cut. And because this is nice straight grain and there's only one small knot, I can do a peel cut here where the gouge bevel is actually in contact and I get a nice peel. If there's a lot of knots, crazy grain in here, or the grains at an unusual angle, then I would bring the handle higher, close the flute, and I would scrape this down with the wing. But for now, this piece of wood should be able to do a peel cut. Very important to keep the tool rest relatively close here. In fact, I'm going to come at just a fraction closer, and we're set to go. Okay, so starting at a nice slow speed, we can build it up. Now from here, I don't stand in front of the tool. I've got my arm to the side here, but we're locked in. Everything's tightened down. Take the speed up, and here we're at about 800, and that's going to work good here. We'll put our chuck down on the floor. Okay, from here, keeping my arm back so I don't run into the corner of the bowl, I can just level the face with this peel cut. It's very rapid, just getting rid of the imbalance. Don't forget to come all the way out, so you're leveling the whole face all the way out. All the way in. Now I can see the size of the chuck that I'm working with. And I don't generally mark it with any dividers or pen. I'm just going to do a quick guesswork here. I'm going to come in and scoop a little bit of material. Now when I'm scooping, I'm peeling into side grain, but I leave end grain behind. So for the second cut, I'm going to stop a little bit shorter than the first cut because I'm building a bigger wall of end grain. If I want to remove more of this, I then take the gouge and I rotate it, and I come from the other direction to peel that out of the way. So I'm getting side grain peeling. I don't want to be pushing into this end grain here. This is very resistant to the cut, and if I open the flute, it'll become grabby. So I've made enough space here for the scraper. So removing this blade, I can now use my scraper. Now this is a downhill cut. All scrapers cut downhill, and because of the 10 degrees, I'm going to move my handle off axis 10 degrees, make sure it's on the tool rest, hand on top, just pushing in, creating that undercut. It's a dovetail, and making sure it's wide enough that the jaws can place on that surface, the flat surface there, and a slight undercut. And I've got a little bit of the corner chamfered off there, and that's okay. That's ready to mount on this chuck. One of the habits I have when I'm putting a chuck on is often we place it down on the lathe, we pick it up, and then you don't realize, but there's wood chips stuck to the bottom of this right now. Chips are sitting right here. So I thread this onto the lathe. It won't be running true because I don't have location. So make sure you clean it off. Therefore, I've got location. It'll be running true. If I don't do that, then when I reverse the blank later to do the inside of the bowl, then the chuck isn't running true, but my tenon is, and therefore I won't have consistency. So from here, I've now got my dovetail in here, the correct size. I'll bring this over the top. A little bit of pressure with my hand, but I'm only going to pinch this at this stage, just enough to grip it. Bring up the tailstock, lock it, loosen this, tighten it in. So that's going to give me true location to the face of the jaws. Then I'm going to tighten this up. Then I'm going to tighten this out with enough tension on here to grip it. Now, while I take it down to the round, I'm going to keep the tailstock there. But with push cut, what's going to happen in a moment or two is once I've got this down to the round and balanced, is this tailstock will be in my way, and at some stage, I've got to remove the tailstock. And that's why I haven't put this on a faceplate. I haven't put it on any other system than really strong expanded jaws. I'm using at least 6-inch jaws here. You could go down to 4 maybes on this and get away with it, but that'll allow me access to shape the piece. So I can shape the piece without the tailstock. For push cut, we need the tailstock out the way so we can push around the piece. So let's get this set up. So the first thing I want to do is get it down to the round. So let's set our tool rest in parallel to the cut because I'm doing a parallel cut, checking all the corners are clearing. Now, checking my height, depending on the size of the gouge that I'm going to use, I'll check the thickness of the gouge to make sure I'm flat pointing through the center. So I'm a tiny little bit high, we'll go down a fraction, and lock it. And again, let's just check that we are clear. So we don't want to be super close, but not too far away, giving us less leverage. We're clear. Now, at this stage, we can afford to run the speed a little higher. And I have options. At this speed here, I have options of taking it down to the round with standing in front of it and use it on a small blank. I'll do that. And I've got my feet parallel for the parallel cut. And I grip the tool with my fingers on top, thumb in the flute, and I slide, glide, float on the bevel. I don't press on the bevel whatsoever. If I press on the bevel, I'll get interaction because the block of wood isn't solid round right now. There's also the option of doing this left-handed. So when I say left-handed, that's where I'm going to stand to the side, and I can cut in this direction with the tool handle in my left and pushing through, or I can do it right-handed depending on the lathe, and I can do it this way too. I put my left foot forwards, back into my right hand, and I can take it down to the round. But for the position of the camera today, I'm going to do this one as a right-handed cut, and I'm able to get away with this because this blank is quite big. If this blank was really small and I'm doing this, I can't get myself into the space far enough. So keeping in mind, the blank has to be big enough to be able to do that. Coming from the other direction, we can actually do it left-handed, and there's a bit more space because the tailstock is smaller. So now that I've got the block of wood mounted on the lathe, I'm going to set my speed so that I can cope with the imbalance. Even though this lathe is a very heavy lathe, it is not yet bolted to the ground, and my student in the future is looking to bolt it to the ground to give it more stability. So for now, I'm just going to take it down the round, get rid of some of the imbalance. And there's 2 types of broken surface here. As you can see, the blank is not truly round, and the surface here is also a broken surface. So as I'm doing the entry cut here, I've got to keep the tool stable. My left hand works as the stability here by pulling the tool down. With my thumb in the flute, fingers wrapped around. The problem is if we put a hand on top is we tend to push it in. So I'm recommending wrapping our fingers around and keeping like a little space in here. It's just as if I pick the tool up from a rack and I place it down. I bring my body to it. I stand at the end of the cut. I lean and I slide the tool on the bevel. And with it having a 40-degree bevel, it's a very natural angle for it to slide. So we'll build up our speed before we do the cut. So starting here, we'll build it up. I think we can turn this around 750 right now. Ideally, I'd like a little bit more speed, but we'll go to 750. And we'll take this down the round. So, nice big cut, just floating in. You see that I'm not getting beaten up, just letting the tool do the work. Just transferring my weight from my right leg to my left leg, sliding on the bevel. I'm not riding on the bevel, I'm not rubbing the bevel. It's just gliding very lightly on the bevel. At the end of the cut, I'm slowing down so I don't break through. We'll do the cut one more time, and then we'll take the speed up a little bit faster. So this is a pure peel cut. I'm just peeling through the side grain, getting rid of some of the imbalance. At this stage, we'll move the tool rest in a little bit closer so I don't lose my leverage. So we're almost down to the round, so I can afford one more cut to get it down to the round. And at this particular point, I believe I can get the speed a little bit higher. And we'll just get that last bit down to the round. So sliding on the bevel. My left hand is just holding the tool down. It is not controlling the tool in any way. All the control is with my right arm, and I'm pushing through. This is a push cut. I'm pushing through the fibers, And once I'm down to the round, I can then start to think about putting shape into the block. So slowing down here at the end of the cut so I don't break through. So here what I'm able to do, because I'm down to the round on this block of wood, is when I start shaping the piece, I can get my final shape just to crest at the right spot, and I don't have to worry about it still being left with a flat spot on the bowl. So now at this stage I can get rid of my tailstock, I can flatten it off, cut off the corner. So I'm doing a series of straight cuts. I'm cutting parallel, flattening it off, cutting off the corner, then I start my procedure for the different curve cuts. From this stage here, it's really important just to check that we do have good tightening on the chuck. So remembering these chucks go counterclockwise to expand the jaws, so I can get a slight extra turn there. And then from here, what I'm going to do is move my tool rest around to the other side, and I'm looking to level the face. So I've evened the outside diameter, now I'm going to even the base, and then I'll cut off the corner. So it's a series of straight cuts. So at this stage, you can check the size of your gouge if it's correct. The nose of the gouge, putting on a tool rest, should cut through the center, so you can truly see it's at the correct height. No angle on the tool rest at this stage. Lock it and lock it, and we can level this face. So going back to my cut here, I'm going to put my left leg forwards because my left arm is forward, and again I go back to traversing back and forth to clean this up. So I'm here just gliding back and forth. This is a rapid cut, but it does not give us a good finish. Remember, the 40/40 gouge is a side grain removing tool. It is not going to give us an excellent finish. So here, we've got rid of the imbalance there. We can see where the bark is. Let's turn, cut off the corner. So here, my handle is perpendicular to the cut. It's still touching my body, and I'm just cutting off the corner. So cutting through bark, keeping in mind the bark contains dirt and grit. In a minute, I'll need to touch up this gouge because it is dulling it much quicker than just the wood. So I'm just getting rid of enough material here that I can start the shaping process. So I've done 3 straight cuts. From here now, I'm going to set the tool rest to an angle that will allow me to do curvature. Now I don't set it at 45 degrees because that's going to predetermine that I don't get a pleasant shape. So if I set the tool rest at 45, because of my 40-degree angle, I can't start closer to the bottom. And I'm already predetermined to make the bowl pretty straight-sided. So I'm going to set the tool rest closer to the bottom than the top. And I'll worry about putting the tenon that I'm going to grip with to do the inside on later after I've formed the shape of the bowl. So from here, check the height. I'm relatively close. I'm going to put my right foot forward. So this time, it's the first time I've done a curved cut today. So all curved cuts, whether I'm doing concave, convex, inside, outside of a bowl, what I'm looking to do is to keep my right foot forward. That lets me reach and swing back to me to be able to form the outside curve. And it's a similar curve on the inside. I'll be starting with the handle away from me on the inside and swinging round. On the outside, it's the same cut, starting away, swinging round. So this is the first time I've added swing to the handle. It's not just push, twist, and lift. I'm actually creating swing, adding a 4th axis to the cut. So taking the speed a little faster now. So I'm just over 1,000 RPM. This wood is pretty wet. Okay, so from here, there's the grip. This is the most important part about this. If I place my thumb on the flute, I'm pushing it in. It's in the flute and down, fingers wrapped above center, canceling the thumb. Now, if your gouge has got a short flute, it's got a longer substrate, you can grip it further back like this. But I must be round the tool, able to pull it down, pull it down. I'm not pushing it into the surface. You can hear if I push it into the surface, it's already bouncing, and that bounce will just get progressively worse. So you can hear it just sitting on the surface, not pushing it into the surface. So from here, lots of leverage, and let's push around the corner. So my right hand is doing all the work, my left hand is just simply keeping the tool stable, letting it slide on the bevel. So it's not riding on the bevel, it is sliding. There's a big difference between riding and sliding. So right now I'm sliding. Very little pressure on the bevel. Minimum energy on that bevel. All the energy is coming from my right hand, letting the tool swing around the corner. My handle is relatively flat because this is push cut. My flute is just open enough to clear the chip. So we can see how rapidly we can form a curvature on this. In 2 cuts, we've already got half the shape done. I'll move the turret in a little closer, and we go again. Now, the thing about push cut here that's really important is we're using the gouge in a very unique way. We're using the nose of the gouge, the very tip, to give us the finish on this surface here. It gives us an excellent finish here with no tone grain. We're using the wing to create the chips. So all the chips are created by the wing. So it's a double action cut. We get a slice with the nose that slices through the sides of the tubes and gives us this excellent finish. But the wing, if you can see, the wing always leaves a damaged surface. Here I didn't exit the bowl completely. You can see the surface is broken. And I'll stop the cut part of the way around. And let's look at what the wing is doing compared to the nose, because this is a double action cut. So again, back to right foot forwards. Handle is not low. I would never be touching the bed of the lathe. That would be way too low. It's relatively flat. The flute is open just enough to throw the chip. It is not open a lot because, again, that is going to give me a little bit of torn grain. I'm not getting the right amount of slice. So closing just enough. And volume doesn't matter. As long as you've got the horsepower and as long as your gouge is big enough, I can take a large volume bite. You see I'm taking here. This is a finished cut even though I'm taking ½ an inch in one pass. But if I stop halfway around, let's look at what we've actually got. So what I've actually got here with the gouge is you can see that I've got a broken surface, all mashed up. The side grain here is all being just chewed off, and that's what's making the chips. But the finish on the surface is really clean, and that's coming from the nose of the gouge. We're using the nose to give us the finish. We're using the wing to clear the chip. And you can see we still got a great finish, even though we're taking almost 5/8 of an inch in one pass. So it's very, the difference between this and other cuts is I'm able to take a cut directly to finish, even with volume. I don't need to take smaller and smaller cuts like pull cut to get a better and better finish. I can still take a very large volume. The only thing I recommend with this gouge is on the final cut, especially on the finished bowl, but it's just a rough out bowl, is I'll sharpen the gouge to give me a really clean, sharp edge, clean cut all the way through the fibers, ensuring I don't have any torn grain. So let's reposition the tool rest just a little bit here and complete that cut, and then we'll decide how much more we need to do to get our final shape. So again, remembering the grip is essential. I'm not putting my hand in front because you can hear that I'm pushing it into the surface. I'm placing my thumb in the flute, fingers around, above center, not relaxed. They're actually under tension, and they're just making the gouge heavy. I'm just wrapping around and relaxing my left arm. It is not controlling the tool. It's simply keeping it stable. And then we push through here. And you can see we move very large volume. Now there you saw a little bit of kicking. I opened the flute too much. I closed the flute. So when I opened the flute too much, I was losing leverage on the axis of the tool. So if I open the flute too much, you can feel it starting to pull. Just close it off and keep going. So at this stage here, I'll do one more cut and then see if I want to do a final shape. So on this cut, I don't need as much volume because I'm almost there. So taking off, at least there's still a substantial bite, more than an eighth from my finished cut here. I'm gliding on the surface. Notice that the gouge handle is not touching my body. For curved cuts for my style, I don't have the gouge handle touch my body. I'm going to let the cut peel out there. So you can see, got a decent curvature on this. And at this stage, if this was a dried or roughed out bowl, then I would want to resharpen the tool. For now, I've not got any torn grain in this area at all because the gouge is still sharp enough for a wet wood. So let's reposition the tool rest and decide on how we want to finish the shape. But what I'm going to do before I do that is I'm going to mess it up. And what I mean by mess it up, I'm going to show you what everybody does. So instead of getting this nice, smooth, flowing cut, is virtually everybody I've ever taught is they all tend to put a little bit of pressure onto the bevel. And nothing at first happens. Is the gouge will be traveling along and then you'll get a little harmonic and then it starts growing and growing and growing. And let me show you how that looks. So from here, what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to be either could bridge my thumb across the flute, which is uncomfortable anyway, or if I relax my fingers, I'll get the same result. And what that means is I start creating friction. You can actually hear the friction, and that's going to create a bounce because this wood is made up of two types of grain. So on a spindle blank, we have either side grain or end grain, but on a bowl blank, we don't. We have side grain here, and we have side grain here, but this is end grain, and this is end grain. The problem with that is the end grain is resistant to pressure. When you put pressure on the end grain, it doesn't deflect much, but the side grain deflects a slight amount. So in every revolution, it's changing density 4 times. So if I start rubbing the bevel, riding the bevel, that starts interacting with the fibers, and you get a little bit of deflection. That deflection makes the nose start to cut a wave. So if I allow that to happen, we'll end up making a ripple on the surface, something we don't actually want. So starting the cut here, I'm going to start with my fingers in position, I'm going to relax them, and I'm just going to go around, and you hear there's a little bit of knocking, and it's going to start to get worse and worse, and now it's out of control. So it went bad very quickly there. We got a little bit of bounce at the beginning of the cut, and it makes a bounce wave. Let's just draw that out. You'll see the bounce wave. This wood's pretty wet, so it may not show it as well as you like, but it should show a little bit. So not as well as I like. There's a little bit of a bounce wave here, 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 and here. And it started back here, but then it amplified really quickly. So let's take it out and do it again. And this is coming from, again, this is mixed grain. It is end grain, side grain. Every revolution, it changes 4 times. So unless I'm gliding on that bevel, if I'm gliding, I'm getting really good cutting. There's no excess noise. We'll cut through this and go a little further. So my fingers are above center, pulling the gouge down, canceling the pressure of the thumb. If I take them away, as I start going round, you can start to hear there's a little bit more noise, and it's starting to build up. And there it is, I've lost control, and we're back to the bounce. Now, how do I cancel that if I get this when I'm creating a bowl? Is I simply, instead of having this bounce, the tool bouncing around, is I restabilize it by pulling the gouge back to the top of the surface and continuing the cut. But if you do it too late, then you can clearly see where you've got the deflection mark and then you fixed it. Ideally, we all get a little bit of bounce in the cut. So let's start from a fresh cut. We'll start here. I'm going to show you, I'm going to let the bounce occur. So I'm going around here, relax my fingers. I'm starting to feel the bounce. I cancel it, keep going. We start it again. It's starting to happen, there's the noise. Cancel it, keep going, and therefore the marks are very minor. And those we can sand out. So when we go around the bowl, we all have the same problem, that we tend to press a little bit with the thumb and end up with those bounce marks. So from here, if I relax my fingers, it starts to lose control, bring them back to control, keep the handle swinging all the way out the bowl. Now I'm not going to finish this bowl today per se as a finished bowl. What I'm going to do now is put a tenon on it, do one quick cut around, and we'll hollow this bowl out. Because it's much easier to turn a solid block of wood that is wet down to a bowl than taking a big dried old log and working with that dry where you end up with more heat, more dust. So in wood turning, we want to get wet logs, rough turn them, and then we let them dry after waxing them and finish them later. So let's put the correct size base on this because I shrunk it down a little bit. So again, grain direction is everything. If I'm cutting in this direction in bowl turning on this particular piece, I am cutting towards end grain. This is aggressive. I get powder. It's hard to cut. If I cut this way with the wing, sideways, I get back to side grain. Side grain, level it, side grain, level it, back to a normal size base, and I get back to these really nice side grain chips. Here, these really big chips that we get all the time. And then, because this is a 40-40 gouge, I'm able to come in from the side here and make myself a dovetail. The dovetail has a 10-degree angle on the jaws, or an average 10 degrees. I can come in from the side and just cut myself a dovetail, and I can grip on that guy. And normally on my dovetails, make sure you don't make it too long because you don't want it to bottom out in the chuck. You want the front of the jaws to mount on the face. But I normally knock a little bit of the corner off the tenon, and that actually makes it somewhat stronger. When the tenon is full length, especially a smaller tenon, and it's inside the chuck, if something goes wrong on the inside, then you can end up popping the tenon off. A tenon this side isn't likely to ever snap off, but on a smaller bull it can. Now we can see I've left with some tool marks here. Let's show you if I was going to do a small cut round here. Ideally, I would normally sharpen on this. We can see we've got a little bit of lifted grain here, and so that's letting me know that this gouge is now probably cut 6 or 7 miles of chips. So we cut a mile of chips every 90 seconds. So thinking about it, that gouge where I'm getting my finish off my nose has started to lose some of the quality of the edge. But on this rough out piece, I'm happy to just take a quick cut around, get a little bit more curvature in it. I want it to be slightly more enclosed, and then we'll hollow this bowl out. So again, setting my tool rest to be able to start comfortably, making sure I end. So this is the end of the cut. So really important here is to find the cut for this one. I'm standing here where I can get to the end. I start off a little bit uncomfortable, back to a comfortable position. And I'm not going to take such a big cut this time, just enough to skim the surface to get a nice finish on here. Just taking off just about 1/8 of an inch. And I'm going to create a little bit more curvature at the top. And if this was a finished bowl, then you know the speed you cut at is important, that we cut slower, and also how sharp the tool is exceptionally important. But this is a rough out bowl, so I'm not being too critical, but I'm going to give it a little bit more curvature at the top and close the bowl a little bit more. And now we're ready to hollow this bowl out. Now, as you can see, I chose the largest jaws to mount this particular bowl. And these are going to be too big for the base. So I'm going to change to a different jaw set. So I'll get a chuck that's already set up. That's the correct size for these. Okay, so swapping the chucks out. Again, just make sure you just wipe the bottom of the chuck before you put it on so we get an accurate mount. Now, ideally, what we want to be able to do here is use the tailstock. So I'm going to bring the tailstock up in a moment to get proper location, because we're not particularly good in many cases at locating here by hand. So I'll use the tailstock to get location. So we've got reasonable location there, but we never get it as good as bringing a tailstock up and using a little pressure. So I've only pinched that up, and we'll bring the tailstock up and use it for initial location. Okay, from here, what I'm looking to do is to bring my tailstock up, put it back in the original center mark, give it a little pinch, and then I can tighten this up all the way. Now, something I want to do here is I'm going to check that I can't see any light through here. So my tenon has a slight taper on it, but my shoulder is also slightly undercut. And I'm making sure that I can't see any light or gap between here. Sometimes you take a piece of paper, see if it fits. I can clearly see nothing's going to fit, which means it should be running true. So we start the lathe up. It's running nice and true. And that was helped to the tailstock. Obviously, if you've got to swing away for your tailstock, extended bed, then you don't have to lift it back on and off. But it's ideally to use the tailstock is much better than just holding it by hand while you tighten it. And we'll give it one final tighten, and then we can start the process of hollowing out the inside. Starting the inside of the bowl using the 40-40, making sure I bring my tool rest in, nice and close, parallel to the face. The height of the tool rest is critical at this point. And the reason for that is we need the nose of the gouge to be able to get to the center of the block here. And that's very essential as we do certain cuts in for safety. So from here, I'm set at the correct height for this 5/8 diameter gouge. I've set my tool rest in position and locked. And the ideal way to cut this block of wood is not to actually curve. The straighter in I go with the cut, the bigger, the easier the chip is to remove. So I don't do any unnecessary swinging on the piece. But first of all, what I've got to do is make sure the face is clean. It's not a finished cut at this stage. If I want to get a finished cut on here, and it's a straight across face, no shape in it at all, then I would pick up a bottom bowl gouge. Because you can see, with the 40-40 gouge, it really likes to tear the fibers out. It likes to remove side grain, not finish side grain. In fact, let's do a quick cut with the bottom bowl gouge to show you the difference. So let's do a quick peel with the 40-40, show you the finish, and why it doesn't give us a good finish. So from here, we're locked on the tool rest, everything's set up. Here we go. So set my speed up again. Just over 1,000 here, left leg forward. Now, this is a really rapid removal like this, but it is not giving me a good finish. If I try and clean this up, it's not giving me a good finish. But this particular gouge is good at removing side grain, but when I'm going parallel, it will always give me a little bit of lifted grain. So here, we can see a little bit of lifted grain here and here. And that's because the wood isn't running perfectly flat. It's got a little bit of deviation in the grain direction. So wherever it deviates, you've got a little bit of exposed end grain, just a fraction of it, and it pulls it out. Here also where the knot was. What's ideal here is a bottom bowl gouge. Now, this is a rough out bowl and I'm going to leave it thick. Does it really matter? No. But in this particular case, if I wanted to leave it with a nice flat rim, then I'd use a bottom bowl gouge. If I'm going to put some curvature in the rim, I'm going to go back to the 40-40 gouge, because the 40-40 gouge likes curvature and it likes cutting into the side grain. This tool here likes cutting parallel with the side grain. So if I wanted to clean this surface up, I would simply use a 40-40, and here it'll give me, so I find the bevel, it's at a different angle because it's got a 60-degree nose on it. It does a really nice job of cleaning up that surface. So you can see here, it's cut across there without lifting any of the fibers. All the torn grain is gone. So this is a side grain finishing machine, but it is not good at removing the bulk. We need to get rid of the bulk right now. So we've cleaned that up, and we could leave that as is. Now I'm going to go back to my 40-40 gouge. So at this stage, I'm also going to change to the longer handle. So we'll go to a 24-inch handle rather than a 20, because I'm going to be much further off the tool rest. So from here, we're going to change to slightly longer. Now, what I'm looking to do here is, this is my original waist in the middle. I want to flatten that off a little bit so I don't have to deal with it later. So let's just get rid of it. So feet parallel, I'm just going to peel it off sideways, peel it out, just going sideways just to get rid of it. So what I've done here is, I've done 2 straight cuts. I did straight across the face to clean that up. I did straight to get rid of the waist in the middle. Now I'm going to do a 3rd straight cut. That 3rd straight cut is a V cut. And what I'm doing with this V cut is making space. And what I mean by making space is, I can't start my entry cut with my gouge with my nose or my bevel coming in really sharp, because I'm going into solid wood. There's nowhere for it to go. So from here, I'm going to place my thumb on the tool rest. It's physically touching the tool rest. It is not just on top of the gouge. It's stopping the tool from moving sideways, and then I'm clamping it, and the gouge flute is slightly open. It is not closed, and it's not fully open. It's not facing the ceiling. It's not parallel to the floor. It's about 45, and I just push in, remove my hand because now it's stable, and almost like drilling a hole, I'm just pushing in, sliding back, making space. Each time positioning, starting again, making space. This is going to give me space in a minute to allow me to do the entry cut. So the more I remove now, the easier it is. Now this is not a pure side grain cut. You can see, here's my side grain. There's a portion of end grain. In a minute, when I bring the handle round, I'm converting now to almost pure side grain. Much bigger, nicer chip. And I use my thumb again to stop it skidding. Into the cut, move back, and go around. This is a different cut. This is the entry cut. So here I'm practicing my rim cut, so I can practice my way out. I can also go a little bit deeper at this stage if I want to at this stage, because this bowl is very deep. So let's go in a little deeper. And then from here, back to doing my entry cut. So not on top, don't get lazy. You've got to place it here, fingers in front, push the nose in. Now it's stable. It's got wood behind the bevel, it's stable. I can now go around the corner. And I'm only doing a limited amount of curve. I'm going to leave that groove at the bottom because it's going to help me later. I'm going to actually physically leave it. So pushing in, swinging round. And I can take fairly big volume here. So here that's getting lazy, I'm jamming my hand, ideally thumb on the tool rest, push it in, big volume. I'm working my way out. So I'm only curving enough to match this amount of the bowl. So whatever depth I'm going, I'm practicing and curving right now. So even though it's a rough out bowl, and in most cases with a rough out bowl, on a bowl this size, we might want to core the middle out with a coring system and save it. But in this particular example, I'm showing how to get rid of the middle, whether it's a large or small bowl, it's the same sequence. We've got the 3 straight cuts where we're flattening off the face, get rid of the waist in the middle by going sideways, the V cut, and then we start our series of curved cuts where the thumb is on the tool rest, pinched and locked, and we're swinging in. As you can see, we can take large volume if you've got the horsepower and enough grip. We can take very large volume. If this gouge was a bigger gouge, I could take even more volume because I have the horsepower. So starting, once it's in its stable, keep the left there as a weight to stabilize it more. And I'm matching my outside shape, so I'm getting the practice. But once I'm in the cut, remember the left hand must be removed. Once I'm in the cut, do not leave your left hand here because those fingers jam the tool. They actually jam it into the surface because they're not letting it do its job. Its job is to slide on the bevel, so get them out of the way and let it come around the corner. Now at this stage here, I've got to consider what is the thickness that I want. Well, generally what we want with a bowl like this is we want to save 10% diameter to thickness. So if I'm a 12-inch bowl, I want to leave just over an inch of thickness. On this bowl I'm about 12, so I'm going to leave inch and 1/8, inch and a quarter. That's going to be my last cut around there. And I want it to be an even wall thickness. Now you can caliper it if you want, but for now I'm not going to caliper this. I'm used to doing these. So I'm able to get it accurate enough just from working like this. If it's a thin wall bowl and it's a delicate bowl, then yes, I'm definitely going to caliper it. But at this stage not. I'm just going to get this area finished. Now I'm starting to come around the corner more and more than before. I'm getting to the point where I'm almost hitting the side of the bowl. That is the maximum distance this 40-40 gouge can get in this bowl. This 40-40 gouge cannot clean up the bottom of the bowl. It is not designed for that area of the bowl. It's designed for wherever end grain is exposed. The bottom of the bowl is side grain. So when we come around the bottom, we're going to use a bottom bowl gouge. So last cut here, thumb on the tool rest, split the line in half, follow the thickness of the bowl. Now as I come around the corner, this gouge is going to be exposed to end grain. So I'm going to slowly close the flute. Not yet, not yet. Close it now so that I don't run into that wall of end grain. Because at the bottom of that V, that is end grain. So in this area here, this is all end grain here. So if I run around the corner, because of the 40-40, the wing of my gouge, which is uphill to get the peel, is now pointing towards end grain. If I run it into that, I can get a catch. So at the very end of the cut, I close the flute, but I make sure I don't stop early. I wait till I get very close to the rim. Now I'm ready to change to the bottom bowl gouge. So a different cut, not a different technique per se, it's still push cut, but a different kind of cut because now I'm looking to peel side grain, whereas before I was slicing through side grain to expose end grain. So what this gouge was doing with the nose of the gouge was slicing through, eliminating any torn grain, throwing the chip out the way, leaving me a nice even wall thickness, ready to change over to now side grain. Because on a bowl blank like this, the side walls are end grain, the bottom of the bowl is side grain, so we use a bottom bowl gouge. So changing out the gouge, this bottom bowl gouge is ground almost straight across. It has a 60-degree bevel angle on it. So that bevel angle can be between 50 and 70. We don't use it outside of those parameters. 70 for very deep, narrow bowls, and 70 is not very functionable, so it's really hard to use at 70. 60 is going to work because this is a fairly deep bowl. If this bowl was wider and more shallow, then I could go down to 50. 50 is easier to use. 60 is going to let me get to the outside of the bowl and to the middle without hitting the rim. If I was using 50 degrees, my handle would be 10 degrees further back, and the likelihood of making it to the middle before I hit the rim would be reduced. As the bowl gets deeper and narrower, I need to have a steeper and steeper angle, 50, 55, 60, 65, and I'll set that on the grinder, but most bowls work at 60, and 60 is ideal for this particular one. Now, this gouge is a bigger diameter, it's a 3/4 inch, so I need to drop my tool rest to match that. I'm also going to lose my upward angle as I get deeper. The gouge is going to end up getting flatter and flatter, and I want a little bit of upward angle towards the cut. So what I'm going to do here is also drop the tool rest. So just using my finger, I grip the tool rest, place it on here, loosen it, then I use my finger to allow me just to gauge how much to drop it down. Dropping it down maybe is an 1/8, 3/16. Now, do I want to angle the tool rest in? Maybe's, maybe's not. The problem is we angle the tool rest in, especially if we angle it in a lot, is this gouge, as we come around the corner, wants to almost fall off the tool rest. So what I'm using instead is a long blade, a long handle, and I'm going to only angle it in just a minimum amount, so that when I get to the middle, I'm only, I've not extended too far outside the bowl, but I'm able to get a nice cut through here, through the middle, without sliding on that tool rest, because if we make it too angled, then it's going to want to slide on it and off the tool rest. So checking our rotation, start again. Now, again, right foot forwards. Now, the mistake that people make with this particular gouge is everybody wants to grip it, and we don't want to grip it with our thumb. We want to grip with our thumb in front, and we want to, once we get the cut stabilized, is we want to release it and push down on just in front of center. That's the ideal position to put pressure on. But everybody wraps the hand around it and they push the tool across the center instead of letting the tool swing. So let me show you the cut. So initially it's going to kick here a little bit because it doesn't have any bevel support. And then once it's on the bevel, then it's stable. So now it's stable. Grip. So I'm digging my ditch. I'm digging out the middle, digging out the middle, digging out the middle. Notice I'm slightly above center. I'm only just slightly above center. Slightly above center, and then finishing on center. So I'm not controlling this tool with my left hand. I'm letting it slide on the bevel. And all I'm doing is weighting it, and I'm not weighting it too much in front that I'm pulling it onto the surface. I'm still sliding on the bevel, but I'm also not jamming it. So if I leave my thumb here, you can see that the tool will start kicking and leaving awful score marks because I'm fulcruming. And we don't fulcrum with our thumb or our palm. We've got to actually almost lift our hand out of the way, let the tool slide backwards. You can see it's moving backwards as I do the cut. And then through the middle. Gripping again, because here it's going to kick. Right here it kicks, grip, release. Now at this stage, the bowl is pretty light. I'm going to give it an extra 100 RPM because the center of the bowl, although it's spinning the same amount of revolutions as the outside, the surface feet per minute is slower. So speeding up a little bit and using lots of leverage, the hand all the way to the back, I'm able to swing through the middle. So it's all about swinging. So if I stand too close to the lathe, the handle will get to me before I get to the end of my swing, and then I'm pushing it across with my left hand. This is controlling with your left hand. Push cut is not about controlling with the left. The left is simply a weight. It stabilizes at the beginning and then it just works like a weight. It is not controlling the tool. And here I can open the flute. So when I'm on the sidewall here, I'm a bit of a closed flute, making sure that I don't catch the corner up here on the bowl itself. So, but as I come around the corner, I'll tend to open the flute a little bit. Right foot is still forwards, allowing me to swing so I can pick up on the original cut from the 40-40 and then join it through. Here I'm taking too much volume, so reducing it. We made the tool too aggressive, backing it off, going again, and letting it slide on that surface. Remember to slow down in the middle, slow down, slow down, slow down, and then just finish through the middle. Let's see where we're at. So using two different gouges in two different areas. This gouge is supreme across the side grain. It will not cut up here. If I try to come all the way up here, it'll just ride off the surface. Because of the 60-degree bevel angle, it doesn't like cutting through the end grain fibers. It likes the side grain. And here, let's just see where we're at on thickness. I think we can afford one more cut. So cleaning out the chips, picking up the cut. So I've got a clean bevel. Gliding on my original cut, gliding down very lightly. If the bowl's warped at this stage, then don't press on the warpage. So if you can hear it's warped a little bit already, I'm going to create myself a brand new surface. There, gliding in, new surface. Not controlling with the left, just wait. Swinging through the middle. Remember to slow the cut down. Slow it down, using leverage. All the way through the middle. Put my hand out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. And I'll do one more light cut, just to make sure I've got enough depth. Now, obviously, this is a rough out bowl. So in that respect, I'm not looking for premium finish, but nothing wrong with practicing your cuts while you're roughing out. And that gives you the skill to when I finish the bowl that's already dry, I'm already warmed up, I've already practiced in the past. And this piece has got a nice even wall thickness all the way around here. No torn grain. We can take this off the lathe. We would wax it at this stage and we'd start the next one. Now, in a minute or two, what I'll do is I'll take my dry one. So no torn grain in here at all. If we bring the camera right in, we can see we've got, and we didn't even sharpen the gouge, which if this was a dry piece, I probably would have sharpened it for the very last cut. Clean surface in here, smooth curvature, no sharp corners in here, just a flowing shape through. There's enough material here that I can determine the final shape on the piece later. Here in Colorado, if I wax it and leave it to dry, depending on where I put it, it would be somewhere between 12 and 20 weeks before it'd be ready. In more humid places, that's going to take you a little bit longer. Here in Colorado, though, we do have to wax, so we'll definitely check. And so what I'm going to work on next is the roughed out honey locust. And at this stage, what I'm going to do is take a bowl that's similar, slightly smaller, of course, but I'll completely finish this one. I'll probably do an undercut rim and a shaped rim and make this as a finished bowl, and I'll actually jam chuck it to finish off the base. There are other options, but jam chucking is something that I like on a lot of my bowls, and we'll demonstrate that as part of the demo. So the bowl that I've just finished, that's roughed out, I'll wax this, leave it a little bit of period of time to dry out. So now what we're going to do is complete this one. This is honey locust, this was silver maple. So this will turn a little differently. It's a little bit denser, a little bit more brittle. And also what I'm going to introduce into this sequence when I turn this one is they're going to be finish cuts, which requires a little sharpening for each of the finish cuts. And also going to introduce negative rake scraping, a technique I developed over 2 decades ago. It's an old ivory technique that my dad used to use. And I'm going to introduce it to where we can use it in wood and the rules for using negative rake on a bowl. So on this particular bowl, I don't have a particular center mark. I've got a dot there where the center is, so I do need to make sure I bring my tailstock up onto that dot, so at least I start with it as far on center as possible. It'll have warped a bit, but the honey locust doesn't warp a great deal, so I don't have a lot of truing up to do in this. And I'm going to use this particular chuck as a friction plate. You could also put a piece of rubber over here if you want to get a bit more stability, but this bowl hasn't warped a lot, so I get reasonable location. I've also taken off the big aluminum point because I don't want it to dig in. This is the base of my bowl, so I'm using a ring center with a point, and therefore it won't dig in to the bowl and leave too deep a mark. So bringing it up here, get it close. We'll wind it in for the last bit so I can be accurate. Looks good. And give it a pinch. Now, I don't need a lot of pressure, just enough, because all I'm going to do at this stage is I'm going to true up this tenon. This tenon will have warped over the last 3 or 4 months. I'm going to true it up, and I'm not going to do a push cut around the outside of this because my tailstock is in the path of the gouge. So any push cut here, I'm limiting my shape because of the shape. Can't get access to it. So all I'm going to do is true up the tenon. I'm going to put it into this chuck, and then what I'm going to do is put a groove inside that chuck to re-grip it and put the bowl back on in this position. Now, it seems like a lot of processes, but it's very quick, and if I've got a number of bowls, then I'll true up the tenon on all of them, and it only takes a few seconds. And once it's trued up, I can re-chuck it a couple of times on that same true tenon. But now if I put this directly into the tenon, I'll be dealing with that tenon running out of true, so let's just get it done. Using the 40-40 gouge, I can still cut my undercut here and everything very rapidly. One tool, same tool that I'm going to use for most of the bowl anyway, so let's go ahead with that. Now remember, we don't need a lot of speed here. I'm just truing up the tenon. So my tenon is going to be slightly dovetailed, but my shoulder here is going to be slightly undercut. That's more important than my tenon shape, so as the jaws sit on this outer rim here, on the outer rim of these dovetailed jaws. So we're checking we've got good clearance. You can see it hasn't moved a lot, this particular bowl. Let's start slow, see what we've got. So taking it up, probably not to over 1,000 RPM, but you can see how much it's warped. It's only warped about 1/8, which is pretty low. So here I'm at 1,000 RPM. So from here, I'm just going to use my thumb on the tool rest to pinch the tool so I don't get a skid as I go in. I'm just cutting a brand new tenon. Coming in here, and we'll do that again. Okay, just going to do that again. Coming in, just cutting a brand new tenon. Slight undercut. Make sure the corner in there is very sharp. You don't want that corner to be radius because that'll affect the chuck gripping it. I can see I've got a flat shoulder here. This is the shoulder. This is the tenon. The tenon doesn't have to be the exact same shape as a dovetail because a dovetail will just crush it. And I'm just going to make sure that it's not too long. So I'm just going to make sure that I didn't make it too long. No, I'm good. I've got plenty of clearance. This bowl is now ready to mount. And make sure you've got good location. Here's one of the times where I'm not going to bring up the tailstock to make sure it's running through, for the simple reason I'm going to put another hole down the center, which I don't want it to be there. But make sure I've got good location, making sure I can feel it, pinch it, check it, tighten it. Again, if you can see a little gap between the front of the jaws and the wood, you don't have true location, and you're forfeiting a lot of the grip strength there. So I've got good location, I've got a good grip, we're ready to go. So all I'm going to do at this stage is, it's a little bit of an extra step, is I'm just going to put as big a diameter recess. So I'm using large jaws here. I can take these guys. I can also, there's quite a bit of expansion rate on this Vic Mark chuck, so I could even go slightly wider. These jaws will allow them to expand at least an extra inch or so. And what I'm looking to do is just using my 40-40 gouge again. I'm going to put one simple, very shallow groove in here, enough to allow to get my chuck inside and still give me access to the Allen key there and be able to tighten, and therefore I can grip this ball again to turn the outside without the tailstock. So looking at the size of the chuck here, I get a little estimation as to where I'm going to be. Now I'm going to turn my tool rest in a little bit because I'm coming in at an angle, just to give my tool support. And I'm going to cut in just a little recess right about here. And the less, the better. So I don't look for absolute perfect contact here. I'm just looking to get enough grip to grip it. So there's just skidding, so not using my thumb enough. There's the undercut. Just enough. That's all I need. That's plenty to grip on in there. And we'll swing that around. And before we do it, let's just check that we do have success. Take it down the right size. Yep, that'll fit on there. We're good to go. Now what I'm going to use here is, you can see I have restricted Allen key movement here, so I'm going to use a regular Allen key in here because I don't have full access. So you can use a ball Allen key or a regular Allen key, so I'm going to grab a 10mm and reach in there. So here with a ball Allen key, you can come in at an angle. There's our location. Expand it out, and not quite enough. So another option here on this particular one is I'm going to remove it and put it inside. That'll just give me more access. And then we'll wind it on. So that gets its location. So now I can start shaping the bowl. I'll take very little off the tenon later. And all I'm looking to do here is to keep the maximum diameter. I've got to get rid of this imbalance on the piece. It's not going to take many cuts on this particular one. I could probably do it in one pass. So I've got a freshly sharpened gouge. So what I'm able to do here is I'll try and do the outside in one pass, maximize my diameter. If there's more warpage than this, then it would take 2 cuts. So I'm going to do a slight oji here, form the shape, and then when I jam chuck it, I'll finish the base off at that particular point. At this stage here, I'm not going to deal with anything on the base. I'm just going to get my form. I like my high point to be here where it already is, so I'll follow that round. So at some stage, I'll be actually cutting downhill. So I've got options. As I get to the highest point, as I come around the corner, if I'm cutting downhill and I think I'm going to get tear out, I may cut that when I reverse the ball from the other side and match up the two. But the honey locust is pretty forgiving. It's not a wood that tears easily, but it is still important to have a sharp gouge. I'm securely on the chuck. I'm taking my speed up just to about 1100 RPM on this ball, just a fraction over 1150. And I'm going to cut this in one pass if I can. So this is why when I'm doing the wet bowl, I'm practicing. When I'm turning a wet bowl like this guy, I'm not just hogging it out and using poor technique. I'm practicing all the time. Those practice cuts give me muscle memory now to be able to do this cut in one shot. I don't have to practice because I've practiced in the past. Every time I rough a bowl, I don't just tear it and shred it up. I make sure that I've got a good clean finish, that I can still cut it without torn grain, nice even wall thickness. I take that technique, that muscle memory I've learned to do this cut. This cut is really important at this stage that I find out where the start and the beginning is. So here, even with this handle, that's going to be my path of where I'm going to be standing. Move it out the way. The end of the cut is going to be slightly enclosed bowl, so my gouge is going to come a little further around, or the handle is. That's going to be the end of my cut. I can also start, so I can do the whole cut here. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring the camera in to shoot over my shoulder so we can see my hand position and how the gouge traverses across this surface. Really important, again, sharpened gouge for this particular cut because it is a finished cut. I'm going direct to a finished cut on this particular piece. And so if the gouge isn't sharpened, if you've done it, used it for roughing out, it's dull. You take a nice cut, you got a great shape, you look at it, you'll end up having torn grain. Remember, torn grain comes from either bad technique, wrong sharpened tool, or badly tool that's actually worn down, or just simply not sharp enough. So quick touch up on the sharp edge on this is essential, then we can perform that cut. So with my 40-40 gouge, I'm going to use the nose of the gouge to give me the finish. The wing is going to give me the peel. I've also got my secondary bevel here. That's just giving me relief. That's important on the concave part of this cut. Not so important on the convex shape. But I'm going to do a little bit of a concave, the start of the base of the bowl, and sweep around. So I've got to find the end of the cut first. So there's the end of the cut going slightly downhill. I put my right foot forward, left foot back, and I let it touch my body at the end of the cut. But at the beginning of the cut, it won't be touching me. And I'll allow the gouge to swing away a little bit to make the concave cut. And then as I come around the corner, it'll be swinging back to convexed, back towards my body. So I'm also going to clean up the tenon, just to make sure it is true, so I don't forget to do it again later. So gripping the tool rest, just make sure the tenon is true again. Because we've remounted it, so let's just make sure it is true. Clean it up, so we get location. And let's start with this cut. So let's see if we can get it in one. Now, because it's a finished cut, I'm going to cut a little slower, a little more methodical. So there's the concave. Look how my fingers are wrapped around the gouge. I'm cutting slow, flute not too open. Just sliding on that bevel. Sliding, gliding, not rubbing. Nice slow control. Nice. It's very easy to get good control of the curvature, just letting the handle come around. A little more downward pressure as I come around the corner, closing the flute slightly. Notice the gouge was a little bit jittery there. I slowed it down, got back to control. Now I'm going to go downhill, so I'm going to go even slower. Close the flute, close the flute, close the flute. All the way out. And that's giving me a finished cut on this. There would be no torn grain on this. You will see some tool marks, that is normal. We're cutting a continuous spiral around the piece. This will be the base that I'll form later, so I'll jam tick it later and I'll take more of that away. But you can see we're ready to flip that around, grip that, and if need be, just thinking about, I've recut the tenon, so I'm just going to make sure I didn't extend it, because as I cut it in, I made it slightly longer. Let's get rid of a little bit of this area, just to make sure it doesn't get in the way. So just peeling that off. Cut a little bit of the corner off. It's a habit I have. Just make sure the corner of the tenon's missing. And let's grip that on the next size jaws down. So from here again, location is the most important. Make sure there's no dust in there. So location, so little pinch, loosen it again, make sure I've got location, tighten it, and then lock it down. Now, at this stage, this is where I got to choose what kind of rim I'm going to do. I'm going to do a radius rim, so it's going to be slight radius to the outside, bigger radius to the inside, and then an undercut, and the bowl will be a bigger rim, but thinner as I go around. So from here, I'm going to set my tool rest at a slight angle because my rim is going to curve in, and I want that to match the curve in. So I'm not going to use a bottom bowl gouge in this stage. Bottom bowl gouge is great if I'm keeping that rim nice and flat, but it's not. It's going to be a shaped rim, so by curving it, I'm exposing end grain, and the best tool for cutting through and leaving a good finished end grain is this particular gouge. Now, at this stage here, this rim probably isn't running true, so I've already preset, so let's level up the face. So from here, let's just level up the face. Just going to go in with a straight cut here, just scrape it down, just to get rid of it, so I've got a flat starting point. Now, what I'm looking to do here is, this won't be my final thickness. The final thickness of my rim will probably be around about here, maybe it's 5/8 of an inch. The bowl itself will be 1/4 all the way around, so I'll be undercutting. Again, because I'm undercutting, I'm cutting in the wrong direction. So at that point, when I'm doing the entry cut later, I'll be very careful to make sure that I'm cutting very slow with a very closed flute. The more I close the flute, the more vertical that nose is, the better the finish, especially when I'm breaking the rule of when I'm undercutting on the bowl, the grain is slightly in the wrong direction. So this stage here, I'm just going to give myself a little bit more space there to get my gouge in position, and let's start that undercut now to get rid of some of that material. So from here, I'm starting my entry cut. So thumb on the tool rest. I don't want to skate. I'm just going to get rid of some material right now. Lock it in. Go. Let's get rid of some material. Same again. So let's shape the rim at this point. And I think that I'm preferring that thickness more than where my line is looking at it. I can always cut it again. So I've got a very slight undercut, not enough to weaken the piece. Position my tool rest in an ideal position right now. And I want the center of the curvature to be off center. And what I mean by that is I don't want to split the difference. I'm going to be slightly to the left side, so a bigger curvature going in, slight curvature going out. So this, the gray line from my pencil, that's the highest point. So I'm going to place my bevel parallel to the face here. So it's not cutting, it's just gliding over. Then I'm going to place it on the line and bring it in till I find the cut and create my little curvature. Remember, slow cut here, because we don't want to damage this outer edge. Going to go one more time. You could do this also with a spindle gouge. A spindle gouge is good at this cut because it's such a small volume. A spindle gouge can give you a similar finish. Now we're going to go the other way. Bevel running parallel with the face, so it's not cutting. Then we'll bring it in till we find the cut. Slow down there because you don't want it to break through, so don't push through there hard because that'll chip the surface. And one more time there, a bit more curvature. Again, slow exit. Now I'm going to match my tool rest to that angle in. So I'm coming in at 90 degrees to the edge of that lip, which is undercut. Now here's the most important cut of the bowl. So I'm going to take one little cut right now, see what we've got. Then I'm going to sharpen the tool. This is the most important cut of the whole bowl right here. And the reason it's the most important cut of the whole bowl, this particular cut here, it's the one that we can't fix very easily with any sandpaper should we get torn grain. So this particular area here, we need it to be super clean. So here it's already super clean, no torn grain, and I'm technically cutting the wrong way. The fibers are running the same as this pencil. So as I'm cutting here, it's not like sharpening a pencil. I'm cutting in the wrong direction for the grain. I'm cutting down the end grain, so the end grain is getting shorter and it has the ability to snap off. But because I cut slow, methodical, and kept the flute closed, they have no torn grain, but I'm going to require one more light cut. So I'm going to touch up the gouge on the grinder, and then I'll worry about going around the corner right after, because this is different. The grain is running in the right direction there, where the fibers are getting taller than each other and laying against one another. And I'll get as far around, probably to about here, then I'll change to the bottom bowl gouge. So bringing the tool rest in again, setting it at the correct angle, so that I'm coming in at 90 degrees to the tool rest and 90 degrees to this rim. So I'll give this gouge a quick touch-up. So with a freshly sharpened gouge, because this is concave, I'm cutting the grain slightly in the wrong direction. I made sure that what I'm going to do is keep my flute very closed, enough to cut, but not open. Open is going to tear the grain, and I'm going to place my thumb on the tool rest and pinch it and come in with a nice slow cut. If I hear any harmonics, I'll slow the cut down further. Pushing hard is what's going to create harmonics. The bowl is thinner down here than it is up here, so you're going to get some deflection. So we don't want to create any harmonics, any deflection, so keep the cut light, keep the cut nice and smooth. So there's my undercut, way over with my handle. All my weight is on my right leg, entering there without it skidding. See, that's it skidding. Made a little error there, wasn't concentrating. Let's go back. Let's clean it up. Cleaned it up. Let's make sure we do a little bit better grip. There it is. And you can hear the harmonics, so go slow. The slower you go, you won't get those harmonics. So it's nice and slow. Give it time to do the cut. Now I'm running into a big wall of thickness here, so now I'm going to get rid of that with individual cuts. So remember, this wood is dry. So just cutting them away, working my way down. I'm gripping the tool here to prevent it from skidding on the entry, then releasing. I just do a quick check on thickness. We're quite thin, so let's keep going, but not too thin. We're getting right to the limit of the gouge swinging because it's starting getting the bottom bowl gouge territory. So we've got one more cut, but let's take the chips out first so I can glide my bevel on my original cut. So get rid of the chips because they're getting trapped by the undercut. So let's get them out, and here what I'm able to do is glide down my original cut, smooth through, get it to the limit of where this gouge is. And the limit is when this gouge is about to hit the rim. We don't want to hit the rim for two reasons. One, it's going to make it deflect, and two, it's going to push the nose in and create a groove. So lighter is better here. So just gliding on the surface, just light pressure on the bevel, just to let it weight it. Doesn't need a lot because I'm doing a light cut. Smooth, slow control. Still want a little bit more out than that, so let's get the dust out again. There's still original tool mark. Let's come back around again, pick it up. There it is. You can hear that noise. Keep the cut light. Keep the light. Don't let it deflect. And we're finished with that area of the bowl. We're now ready to change over to the bottom bowl gouge, so we'll take the dust out. We'll move the tool rest into a more optimum position, slightly lower because the bottom bowl gouge is slightly thicker and we lose some of our upward angle here. And then from here, let's change out the blade. So the bottom bowl gouge, I did touch it up. It's ground at 60 degrees. The wings are straight and it has a relief angle at the back, so the bevel is very short on this. And let's go to a longer handle. Here we need more leverage, so I'm going to go to a 24. Let's check we can get to the middle. There it is. So this is where I want to find the end of the cut. No point in starting this cut here until I know where the end of the cut is. That's where I'm going to end up. So I've got to dig this out or turn it away to get to the middle. So from now, I've got enough thickness on this. Let's go for this. But here's the thing. Remember, we're not pushing this across with the left. The left is simply supporting it. Now, when I start the cut here, it's going to kick a little bit. It wants to kick, because it's got no bevel support. So gripping with the thumb not behind, but in front. When I pick up the cut, and once the bevel's in contact, I can release. So pick it up, release. Pick it up, release. Okay, now I'm going to go back a little further. And remember, we want to decelerate towards the center. So now we just keep bringing the cut back. There's still a groove there from the original cut. So gliding on the surface, not cutting much out, just skimming it, super light. There's the cut. Opening the flute as I go around here. And I might be able to make it to the middle in one pass. This bowl wasn't very warped. No, I'm going to do it in two, just lighter cut. And we'll go one more time. Should have enough material. Slowing down, notice I'm slightly above center. I'm sitting on top of the curve and then finishing to center. Notice I came in too aggressively there, kicked. I wasn't on the bevel. Let's go back and pick that up. So always finding the bevel. So I'm starting with no cut. Then I'm finding the bevel by bringing it around. Then I'm moving forward. If I don't find the bevel, I can't guess it. So the common mistake that everybody makes with this cut is one is they don't find the bevel. They start live. They come in too square, the bevel's off, the nose touches, and it kicks. We want to start with nothing, bring it around till we find the cut, and then transfer the cut forwards, and then down through the middle. So I'm not pushing from behind at all. My left hand is completely neutral. It's simply weighting the tool. So you can see I've got a little bit of a spiral mark there. It's probably not visible on the camera, but that's because I was over rubbing my bevel. So I had my hand a little bit too much pressing on it, but we'll do one more cleanup cut, but let's just check the thickness. Yeah, I'm good on this. Yeah, I'm about 1/4 all the way around. You can caliper at this stage if you want. From my experience, I've done enough of these that I'm not going to caliper this. I've got a nice, pleasant curvature. This is easy to sand. I don't have any torn grain in here. So even if I'm bringing power sanding, hand sanding into that corner, I don't have to work it too long. All I've got to do is get rid of tool marks that are always there. Everybody has tool marks. That's just your body motion, the flow of the cut. So from here, remember, this is the cut that everybody has a problem with. Most people don't find this cut with the 40-40 too difficult, but this is difficult because what they do, we stand too close to the lathe, we block the path of the tool, we've got to stand at the end, and then we don't grip this. We grip it initially if there's ridges, and then as soon as the tool's stable on the bevel, we release it. Remember, we're sliding on the bevel from the back, all the control from the back. We are not pushing from the front. It doesn't have two steering wheels. This is your steering wheel. This lets me push, lets me slide along on the cut, and we're sliding on the bevel, not riding. If I ride on the bevel, there's very slight undulation marks, and that's from me riding on the bevel more than gliding. So let's cut that one more time. I have enough material, not a lot. I'm at just probably a fraction under 1/4 there. So very light pressure. Notice my pressure is in front of the gouge. It's putting pressure a little on the bevel, but I'm not pushing it across. So light is better. Let's find that cut. There it is. It's my last cut, so nothing wrong with going slow, methodical, not controlling with my left. All my left is doing is just adding a little bit of mass to the front of the tool. Notice that I'm slightly above center, just slightly. Then I'm finishing down to center. Now at this stage, this bowl is finished, and I would normally sand right at this stage. So I'd sand the inside here, I would sand the rim, and then when I jam chuck it, then I would finish off the outside and sand the outside. And there's different ways. That's just process, it's not technique. So you've got options on how you do it. If you're using a vacuum chuck, that's another method. However, I want to talk a little bit about at this stage is negative rake scraper. So I'm going to go across the room, pick up a couple of negative rake scrapers, and talk about the rules of negative rake scraping so that those where you've got a little bit of a problem, where you've got blend marks, maybe you've got some torn grain, you didn't quite get the shape you want, didn't quite get the even wall thickness, how to fix that with negative rake. But here's the thing about negative rake. It's so easy to use when used correctly. It's really easy just to hack it out with a bowl gouge and then fix it with negative rake. We want to use negative rake when we're just having a bad day. There's a slight mark there. Negative rake is a really effective technique, but we don't want to be using negative rake as in it'll fix everything and I don't have to learn any skills with the gouge. Ideally, right now, I don't need negative rake on this. I wouldn't pick it up in most cases, but if I'm doing a very thin bowl, a very delicate bowl, or I've got to backtrack, because this is one thing that negative rake allows you to do, when a bowl is super thin, you can't go back with the gouge because it makes it flex more. Negative rake does not make the bowl flex. It's also not like a conventional scraper. If I was to use a conventional scraper in this area of the bowl, it would just instantaneously blow it up because it'll self-feed on that end grain. So I'll grab a negative rake scraper and a regular scraper right now and talk about the rules of those so you know how to use them. Then what I'll finish off with is jam chucking this, and we'll go through then the grinding and sharpening of each of the tools so you can see how to perform the shapes that we want for the bottom bowl gouge, the 40-40, and how to touch up a negative rake to make it usable. So growing up as a production spindle turner, we didn't use scrapers a lot, but in those days we used a conventional scraper. So this is a conventional scraper. Everybody's been using these for centuries, never mind decades. Conventional scraper is simply a single angle blade. So it doesn't have a relief angle on the top. It can have a burr or not have a burr. It can be carbide, it can be steel. However, the problem with a conventional scraper is it's attracted to dense woods, it's attracted to broken surfaces, it's attracted to any end grain, and especially end grain. So in this bowl here, this scraper here might work great in the bottom, but as we get tempted to come round and round the corner, this edge here is very attracted to the end grain, and it's going to start pulling the tool in. And it's so easy for it to pull in, blow up the bowl. It's just simply a catch. It's attracted to the end grain, and it's also attracted to thin wood, because thin wood will climb on top of it. The alternative is a negative rake. Now this particular negative rake is meant for deep bowls, but I'll show you it's got the same profile. So we can see the two are designed for very deep bowls, except this one, the lower one, the conventional scraper, is designed for the very bottom of a deep bowl, but not designed to come up the side wall, which is end grain. The very bottom of this bowl here is side grain. But as we come around, it starts to become end grain. So the negative rake is supreme here because it's not aggressive, it doesn't self-feed, and as long as it's got a burr, it's still sharp. But if the burr is gone, you need to stop using it, put a fresh burr on. So we can bring this around and we can take it to the center if we want. The problem with negative rake, when you get to center, if you go past center, it's still sharp the other way up. So keeping in mind, when you get to the center, don't push past center. Conventional scrapers, when they go past center, just rub and nothing happens. So this tool is designed especially for this area where the end grain is. We can use a conventional scraper across the bottom here, or we can go all the way through with this. In anything can be a conventional scraper. So this is a conventional scraper, single angle, straight across. This is the one I used for a dovetail. But the problem with this particular tool is, yes, it's great for doing the dovetail because it's going into side grain, but it is not good at coming into end grain. So coming in from this direction or this direction on a bowl, it would just simply grab. However, if you use a skew on its side and you grind and sharpen it, you'll generate a burr. That burr is negative rake scraping. Without the burr, it isn't negative rake scraping. This particular one has been honed, so it doesn't have a burr. I can't feel it. Right now, it's just a skew. If I used it like this on the outside of the bowl to follow the profile, it won't work because without the burr, I don't get the abrasion effect. We want the burr to abrade, especially on the end grain. So in this case here, I would use more of this type of negative rake, this shape. Now, it doesn't have to be a replaceable blade. This is a solid 10V blade, and this is a replaceable 10V blade. They both do the same thing. This one is replaceable. So this has got a burr on it. I can actually feel it. The included angle on this one is about 50 degrees, and it can be anywhere from 40 to around about 70. But as the included angle gets greater than 70, you don't get a big enough burr. It wears off too quick. So the closer I can get to 40, the bigger the burr, the longer it lasts. The better quality the steel from M2, M4, M42, 10V. You know, as you get to 10V, the steel is more abrasive resistant, so the burr lasts longer. But it still doesn't last long. So I have with a burr on this 10V probably about 60 seconds of life. After that, it's done. If this was M2, I might only have 20 seconds of life. However, it is extremely effective at taking out bumps, taking out imperfections. So let's use this right now. We'll show you on this bowl. It's pretty thin, as you can hear, and we'll use it to abrade around here and towards the center, but we'll stop a tiny bit short of the center. And in general, a bowl like this may not need it, but if you've got some imperfections you want to get rid of, this is very effective. It's much more aggressive than coarse sandpaper, but it doesn't leave the scratch pattern of coarse sandpaper. So when you sharpen this with an 80 grit and you use it as a negative rake, it'll give a finish that's equivalent to about 220. You can start with a much finer sandpaper, maybe it's a 180, to then take out any of the tool marks left by this little guy. So let's use it on the inside of this bowl, and let's clear off the lathe for now. So I've sharpened this particular scraper already. So I sharpened the underneath. That generates a burr on the top surface. So I've got a burr all the way around the edge here. I can physically feel it. I always check after I've sharpened it, I can physically feel it. If I can't feel it, I don't have a burr, it's already dull. So remember, we're not using this as a cutting tool. We're not using it even technically as a scraper. We're using it as a form of abrasion. We're taking that burr and we're going to use it to abrade this surface. And why it's so effective compared to sandpaper is this burr cannot flex like sandpaper. Sandpaper will follow the undulations that are already there, and it'll create whatever you do with the pressure, the shape that you're following. With this, it'll cut right through the undulations from the tool marks before from the gouge. Now, obviously, don't be aggressive with it. It's not for completely reshaping and being aggressive. It's for skimming the surface, making it better. So from here, So placing it on. Now make sure you've got it flat and supported. So don't tilt it because that'll pull it back down. Coming in here, we can see the negative rake will just pick up on the surface. We're not looking to be aggressive with it. And we can pick up on the surface all the way around. And clean up the surface. It's very good at taking high spots out, but it's not aggressive. So here, just cleaning up the inside here. I don't have a lot of tool marks to take out from the gouge, but you can hear it's not flexing the bowl. Now I don't want to be aggressive because that will flex the bowl, but I'm using the burr to abrade the surface. And I can work to the center. Now just don't work past center, or I can work from the center out. Just gliding over the surface. It's removing quite a lot of material, as you can see. And it will work all the way out and all the way in. So I can work in both directions. And it likes to glide right over any bumps. It just takes them right out. When you get to the center, slow down, don't go past center. And that's taking off a reasonable amount of material. That would be a lot of material to remove with sandpaper. But here, as long as I don't go too long with it, I've still got the burr. Let's see if I still got it. So it's still got about 50% of the burr left, so if I need to go again, but I don't need to take any more out of this. It didn't tear the grain. It just took out some of the gouge marks, really smoothed it out. That'd be a lot easier to sand. You can also use negative rake on the rim here. In this case, I could use a skew chisel. So obviously, we don't want to use convex to convex. In this case, I'd use a skew. The skew doesn't have a burr on it right now, so I'm not going to use it, but I could show you if you wanted just to clean up the rim, I could pull this back a little bit. And depending which way I put the burr on, I can follow my curvature to clean this up. And then I can use a skew again with a burr. I could clean up the outside here. But what I'm going to do now is finish this bowl by showing jam chucking, how to clean off the base and complete the bowl. At this stage, I would sand this piece on the inside, sand the rim. Then I would sand the outside at the point where I jam chuck it and finish off the base. So at this stage here, I'm going to use this dry block of wood as my jam chuck to finish off my dry honey locust bowl. Obviously, I would have sanded and completed the inside, but this is a demonstration. So jam chucking this type of bowl that has an undercut lip is a little bit more tricky than a rim that comes right out sharp because I'm working a little bit blind. So what I'm going to do is put a little taper on this, find out where it fits the taper, and then where the taper ends, where it's fitting, I'm going to make it parallel and fit on a parallel section up to a shoulder. That's really important to get location. So we're going to get it close with a gouge, and then what we'll do is we'll use a beating and parting tool as a negative rake scraper to get the final diameter so we get a more accurate fit, because the gouge has limitations on getting it super accurate. So again, just checking my diameter, I need to put a little bit more taper on this and find out where it fits. So just cutting in here, let's find out where it fits. So we'll get rid of a little bit of this. At the end of the cut will be the shoulder. So I still need to go down just a fraction more. So we'll keep going. So that's starting to fit on there right now. Now, like I said, I'm working blind. So you can see there's a gap right here. So I don't have true location, but also I don't want to grip on a taper. I put a deliberate taper. I want to grip on a parallel surface. And the reason for that is if I grip on a parallel surface for about 1/4 inch or 1/8 of an inch at least, when I slide up to my shoulder, if the bowl comes loose when I'm working it, it doesn't fall off immediately. Right now, if I hammer this on here, it seems like it's tight, but if it wobbles or comes off at all, it will immediately drop to the floor. And that's got a pretty good grip on there. So that is already pinched in there quite tight. But it's a false sense of security. So keep in mind, it felt like it was good, but it wasn't what we wanted. So where it's fitting right now, sometimes it'll leave a mark on there. It hasn't, yes, I can see it, it's left a little mark. So we want to take that parallel there. So I'm going to use at this stage a square beating and parting tool. I can use the side of the tool because it has a burr on it. So I can use the side to cut sideways. That's going to be my location point for the bowl, and then I can take this down to the round. So let's not take the line off quite yet, because once we removed it, we've lost it and we have to move further back. That's good. It's going on pretty tight. Let's take it down a little more. And what I'm going to do here is remove a little bit more of the taper. Take up a little bit here so it might interfere, and get rid of a little bit here. Okay, so what we got here, we're very close. However, something about honey locust, brittle woods, especially thin bowls, don't force it. If you're going to force it, you're going to crack it. So at this stage here, I'm pretty close, but I'm going to skim it down a little bit more. It's just not quite there. Now, here's the problem. You end up skimming a little bit, and all of a sudden it's loose. So you've got to go somewhere between the two. So I'd rather take off too little and do it twice than do it once and take off too much and have to start the process again. So from here, coming in. Now this is pretty parallel. There's not a lot of taper on this. I'm just skimming off a little bit, make sure I've got location. Now that may not fit at this stage. We may get lucky, we may not. Let's see where we're at. Oh, that's going on too easy. Nope. Adjust that little bit. Yep, there it is. I slid up, it's going up too easily. So all I'm going to do is simply take the same chisel, come sideways with a slight taper. So I just took off a fraction. You saw it wasn't very much. I'm going to go sideways, 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 and now just leave a little bit more material. There it is. Now, because my bowl is undercut, I don't have to remove too much of this. It's not going to hit inside the bowl, because we want location on this sharp edge rim of the bowl here, and then we want location against the shoulder, so we get grip on this inner edge. No, still not there. So we're going to give it a bit more taper. So I took off more than I intended initially. Now remember, I'm not fitting up against the front of the bowl. That's my location. I'm fitting up on the inner rim. So my location is further back from the front than you think. Ah, there we go. And that's a little too tight. So I know that won't go all the way. So less material than I took off the last time when I skimmed it down. So just nice and light. That might go all the way, but what I want to make sure here is that I'm not touching any of this area here. So again, using the gouge, just going to use the wing with a closed flute, going to scrape that down. Just getting it out the way. Make sure it's not interfering. And I'm going to skim this just a tiny bit more. Less is more here. Let's see what we've got. Yep, that's going to go. Going to give it a little tap of the handle, not too much. Let's see what we got. Okay, we are good to go. Now we're pretty secure on that. Now, if I was a little bit nervous about my fit here, then I would tape it. And what I mean by taping it is, I would take this down to the same diameter and put masking tape over the top. So let's just demonstrate that. On this particular case, I'm pretty sure it's not going to come off, but over a period of time, it will loosen. So I can take this down with my gouge. I don't have to take it all off. And then what I could do here is, especially it's important when you're using a tape, masking tape, it's not particularly strong. We all know that masking tape tears easily. But by putting it over here and rolling it backwards, like so, what it stops the bowl from doing is creeping. So if I put it on here and I rub it in, it stops the bowl from doing the initial creep sideways, which starts it to come off. Especially if you're taking a little bit of a heavy curd, it'll pull into the curd a little bit, and then the bowl can go flying. We don't want it to go flying, because then we've lost a piece that we're just about complete. So this stage here, I'll leave the tape on for now. Important to put it on backwards so it doesn't unwind, and then we don't need the tape anymore. If it's a really expensive, valuable piece of wood that you put a lot of time in, there's nothing wrong with going around a couple of times to really be secure on it. But what the tape is working out, as we know masking tape isn't strong, it's just stopping the initial creep. Now at this stage I measured the inside of the depth, and I do need to keep part of this base here. I went a little bit deeper there than I realized at first, so I can't remove all of this tenon off, so I'm going to get a bit more depth. So I'm going to recut the OG, but I'm not going to cut all the way to the top. I'm just going to blend it out with my 40/40 gouge. So let's do that, then we'll hollow out the base. And I'm going to lose about 1/8 off the bottom, so there's a bit of sapwood here, some of that will come off. But let's get the shape in first. So, from here, let's get my speed up a little bit. So running about 1100 RPM on this about 11-inch bowl. So let's cut in here a little way, just getting rid of the original chucking marks. And then this corner off. So you can see what I'm looking to do is to get rid of this groove here created from the original cut that I gripped on. So I'm pretty close. Now I don't have a lot of spare material, so I don't have 10 shots at it. I've got one more go to get this out. So entry cut, swinging nice and early. So swinging out, 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 and then slowly back to follow the original shape. Fading out very slowly. Okay, and I like that shape, so it's come in good. So now I've got more material than I realized. So I've got the option of thinning that off a little bit or leaving it as it is. I'm pretty happy with it. I'm going to leave it as it is. So what I'm looking to do is to give it a nice formed base. In other words, the base of the bowl will be sunken in a bit and it will follow the profile of the outside of the bowl. So it'll have a slight curvature and I'll have a shoulder here. So first of all, I've got to get rid of a little bit of material. Now, remember we're on a jam chuck. Now I'm pretty secure on this jam chuck. It's not going anywhere and I've got tape. But that doesn't mean I can be aggressive. So, sole being nice to the wood, check your height, center to center. Let's get rid of a little bit here, a little bit. So what I'm doing here is setting a little bit of depth. Then I'm going to go in straight and just do a bunch of straight cuts in. Just getting rid of material, get rid of material. I didn't put my thumb on the tool rest, you saw it skidded. Thumb on the tool rest, thumb on the tool rest. Just getting rid of material. One bit more. So now I've got this at the depth where I can see through the bowl. It's lower than the base. I can then follow this round, so sinking this in. Now, when I'm cutting in this direction, this stresses the jam chuck more than pushing in towards it. So making sure that I'm taking a nice, slow, steady cut here. Don't push hard because we don't want to stress the jam chuck. Just give it time, slight curvature, following the inside shape, closing the flute at the end of the cut. That's giving me a good form. It's just looking through the piece. Yep, that matches it right now. Now, sharp entry cut, don't want the tool to skid. So, thumb on a tool rest, I'm coming in at an angle so it doesn't look like it's dovetailed. It's going to be tapered in so it looks quite natural. I'm gripping nice and tight, don't want the gouge to skid. Now, getting into the corner, slow it down so I don't damage the other surface. Got it. And then I'm just going to use the wing here, right on the side grain, like a little scraper there, just scraping very lightly with it, just a tiny bit, just to blend that tool mark out. And then I'm going to go one more time and push around for one nice light finish cut. So let the cut fade out, right into the corner. Yeah, so I'm cutting from two directions in the corner. I cut in from one direction, cut in from the other, matching them up so it's nice and sharp. And then this bottom here, the base, it's a little bit thicker than I want, and I want to make sure it's slightly undercut. So I'm going to use the bottom bowl gouge in that position. So in this position here, unless I'm scraping with the wing here, which is not ideal, especially on honey locust, it's going to tear this up a little bit. I can do a very light cut also, so that sometimes works. So here, sometimes a very light cut, slight angle will work here. Or I can use the bottom bowl gouge. So in this particular case, I prefer the bottom bowl gouge. Now remember, it's a 60-degree bevel, not a 40, so it picks up in a slightly different position. Just gliding across. I want that really clean. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll sand the whole piece right now, and sand in here. I'll cut that last and then sand that last so that I keep this nice keen edge on there. But at this stage, this piece is ready to come off. Now, looking at the base there, do I think it's a bit, maybe a little bit thick? In this particular case, would I cut it again? Maybes, but for today I'm going to leave it. Let's undo the tape. Now, we know this piece is pretty tight on here. How do I remove it? Well, we don't want to damage it when we remove it because it's a finished bowl. So what I want to do is I'm going to take a thin parting tool and I'm going to part into the jam chuck. Not part into the bowl, of course. Part into the jam chuck about a 16th to maybe an 1/8 away. Now, don't use a diamond-shaped parting tool. I'm going to use a flat parting tool, so let me grab one of those. I've got a freshly sharpened one. So, conventional flat parting tools, just a 16th thick. You could use up to an 1/8 thick. And what I'm looking to do here is to simply part in straight, scraping with it, because remember, we're going towards end grain, so I don't have the handle low. And I'm looking to leave myself enough material in the piece of maple that's the jam chuck that I can then push this tool in once the lathe is switched off and twist and push the bowl blank off, because right now I have no way of gripping and pulling this off. Now, don't forget at this stage, this is a stage where you'd sand it, finish it off completely, but this is the demo bowl, so let's get it off the lathe as is. So, positioning here, parting in. Now, I want to part in a reasonable depth, so at least a 1/4 inch. Now what I'm going to do here, that's deep enough now that when I twist my chisel in here, I can just fulcrum on the jam chuck to push the bowl off. So I'm not damaging my bowl. I'm damaging my jam chuck, but we don't care about the jam chuck. There it is. And that should allow me to pull that off. And so what we've got here is our undercut foot. Nice little rim, and you could make that thinner if you want. And the bowl is set to go. So now let's cover grinding and sharpening. We'll show you how to create and maintain a 40/40 plus the bottom bowl gouge, and we'll cover a little bit about negative rake scraping. So now I'm going to sharpen the tools that we used throughout the day. So I've got a variety of gouges and a negative rake scraper. So one of the problems we have when we're sharpening is we don't always have the luxury of being able to remove the handle. So if I can't remove the handle, it's important that we have our grinder have access, especially because I'm right-handed, have access to the left side of my grinder. And what that lets me do, it lets me position the gouge so I can do one wing, rotate all the way through, and make it to the other wing if I can't remove the handle. Now, if I can remove the handle, that makes it easy. I can put the handle to one side, and I can stand in front and swing. But I'm going to work as if we can't remove the handle and show you hand positions, because one of the problems we have with the handle also is if we have a handle, we tend to use it. And what I mean by that is, when I'm sharpening this tool, even with a handle, I am not going to grip the handle. And the reason for that is I reach around, I can't put it flat on the platform. So by bringing my hands closer up, I'm able to keep them flat on the platform and grind this gouge without having to move my feet. Now, because I'm right-handed, and I'm swinging my right arms doing all the work here, is I need my right foot forwards. That allows me to reach the other side. Because it's very easy to come up the grinder and put your left leg forwards and think, oh, this is easy. And then when you get to here, I can't reach to put it down. I have to put my right foot forwards because it's a form of curvature, and therefore I can follow my edge. Now, before we get going with this, let's set up the grinder. So let's just use an angle gauge. Now, if you don't have an angle gauge, you can still use a protractor. If I use a protractor, what I measure is what I get. So sometimes I have to go back and forth till I find the correct angle. But we'll show you how to use the protractor in a moment. For now, I'm going to set with the angle gauge. I'm going to use 40, and I've already preset this. So with an angle gauge, I'm just using the lower one, not designed to use the top one. Here, use the lower one. I bring it in, and it fits on the curvature, and I lock my platform like so. Now, one of the other things I want to be able to do here is because my gouge is 40/40, I'm looking to use my 40 degrees on here to draw a line across here. So I'm going to do it in pencil. There's a 40 there. So from the top down is 40. I'm going to flip it over and do the same on the other side. And that's the line that I grind between these two lines. So I've got a 40 degree from the top down here, same on the other side. So in bowl turning, for the 40/40 grind, we've got two types of bowl gouges. This one is an elliptical flute, sometimes called parabolic. This one is a V flute. The V flute has exactly straight sides, and a slight radius at the bottom. This one has slight curve, tight radius at the bottom, slight curve. So the grinding of these is slightly different, even though the side profile is identical, which is straight wings with a tight radius, pointy nose. And what we're looking to do here is use the lines that we've drawn on before, which is 40 degrees down and 40 degrees down, to work between the lines. Now, the main thing is we don't want to try and grind it in one. It's a little bit tricky to do that, especially the first time. For a parabolic elliptical flute gouge, I'm going to grind it in 2 grinds. I'm going to grind, because it's slightly curved, I'm going to grind part of the wing all the way around to the nose, just past the nose. Then I'm going to start on the opposite side, part of the wing all the way around to the nose. Now, the main thing to do with this is setting the angle. The flute wants to be slightly open. Remember, this gouge is a V gouge, not a complete U, so the flute stays partially open. So that little tight radius here stays slightly open, and the wing inside is parallel with the rest. That's the starting point for this wing here. So I use the line as a guide, but what I do is I actually start on the opposite side of the wheel, and because this is a curve, I'm going to bring it across the wheel by dropping, 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 and wait until I get to the very tip, and then rotate through. Same on the other side. I'm going to come across the wheel using the line as a guide, set my flute the right amount of open, come across the wheel, dropping, dropping, dropping. When I get to the tip, I rotate through. So let's put that into action. So remember, both hands are on top, holding the tool down. I don't want to hold the end, I don't want to hold the handle, because I'll want to lift it. So let's start on this side first. This is my line. Let's take it to the other side, rotate it the right amount. There I can see that my wing is parallel with the rest. I start by coming across the wheel. I'm dropping, 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 and then at the very end, I rotate through and past center, and that gives me one wing done. Same on the other side. I don't move feet positions, hands on top. There's my guide, start on the other side of the wheel, draw across, dropping, 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 dropping. At the very end, rotate through. This wheel here is a slightly lower angle. I reach over and I take the heel of the bevel off. So I just grind the back of the bevel off. So I end up with a short bevel at the nose, and that gouge would be ready to use. Now, the difference between this gouge and a V gouge is a V gouge means that the inside is completely flat. So the surface contact with this inside wing is matching this straight surface, because this is straight and that is straight. So what I do with this is I don't need to drop it the same way. I place it on the line, draw it across, and I draw it across, back and forth a couple of times like a skew. Then I can do the other side. Bring it across to the line, back and forth like a skew. Then I drop down and just lightly blend between the nose and the wings. And that gives me the tight radius. I end up with the same shape. I reach over, I take the heel off. And you also have the option of taking the heel off by just simply dropping it and taking it off on this wheel too. So both are giving you the same result. I need my bevel at the nose not to be longer than 1/8 of an inch right there. I don't take the heel off all the way around because I don't need to. It's just behind the slicing action that I take the heel of the bevel off. The gouge wants to look like it's relatively straight here. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can be slightly concave, it can be slightly convex, but only slightly. Ideally, it wants to be perfectly straight, tight radius on the back. So looking from the side, it's flat. Looking from the back, it's a tight radius. This gouge slices with the nose, peels with the wing. My other gouge, my elliptical, will look the same. It's got flat wings, tight radius on the nose, short bevel behind the nose, and that's ready to use. Now, when we move on to the bottom bowl gouge, that's slightly different. So the bottom bowl gouge, I'm going to use the platform at 40 degrees right now to keep the bevel short, and I want to shorten the bevel all the way around. And the reason I want to keep a really short bevel all the way around on this particular gouge, it's the only gouge where I change angles between doing a deep bowl or a shallow bowl, a platter, and what have you. So I'm going to remove a lot of the material that's not needed at the back. Just going back and forth, shortening my bevel. Now I'm also going to change the angle to 60 degrees. So 60 is the angle in between the 50 and 70 that we can use for this tool. So I need to slow this grinder down. So I'm going to use that right now to slow it down. Just using the wheel by taking more of the bevel off. Because what I'm going to do is set the platform now at 60 degrees. So just again using an angle gauge, select the 60 degrees. That means my platform is going to come up slightly. So we'll loosen that off, loosen this off, and bring this up. Now remember, if you use a one-way platform, bringing this up higher will bring the platform closer to the wheel, and you'll need to reset the distance. For these particular platforms, they stay at the same distance, so I can adjust them. Now, I still don't adjust it whilst it's running, but I adjust it like so, and I don't have to change its distance. That's set at 60. So what I'm able to do here with my bottom bowl gouge is now just follow it round. Now I don't need to use the lines. These lines were for the 40-40 grind. This gouge has the wings back just a tiny fraction, 5 degrees usually max, almost to vertical. So from here, what I'm looking to do is just giving it a tiny swing as I go around, starting. Now this gouge does go completely on its side because it is a true U. It's a 180-degree U. So I go from vertical all the way around to vertical, and that's all it takes to sharpen this gouge. It's very simple, really easy to use. So now let's go back to talking about other tools that we use. So I'm going to again switch this grinder off. We'll wait till it slows down, and I'm going to just talk a little bit about the other gouge, which is sharpening the spindle roughing gouge, and we'll reset to 40 degrees for this. So let's reset this little guy at 40. It only takes a few seconds here, and bring it up. Once it locates, tighten, tighten. Now, for the spindle roughing gouge, it doesn't matter if you have a handle on it or not, because the handle tends not to get in the way, because it's working almost perpendicular. So this gouge is almost vertically straight across. We want to keep the sharp corners on it because we actually use them in spindle turning. And this gouge here, depending on the profile given by the manufacturer, this one is very slightly straight, almost 180-degree radius, and then there we've got a slight straight. So how I sharpen this particular tool is I go back and forth on the straight bit, then I twist it round, then I go back and forth on the straight bit and twist it round again. And that would give this gouge ready to go, like so. Now remember, this gouge can't be used on a bowl, and we don't remove the heel off this gouge. It's always left full length. Now, what I wanted to show here is show the difference between a protractor angle and an angle gauge angle. We set the platform with an angle gauge, and what the angle gauge does, it actually sets for the curvature. It gives us a cutting edge angle of 40 degrees, not the measured angle. When we measure it with a protractor, when we put it inside the flute and we close the protractor, you'll see it leaves the angle at greater than 40. Right there at the end. It's measuring right now about 42 to 43, and the reason for that is what the protractor is doing, it's measuring the curvature. There's a slight curve and hollow in here, so it's measuring both the nose right at the edge and the heel, but that isn't where the cutting edge. The cutting edge is right here, so it's measuring that curve. So with the protractor, if you're using your gouge and setting up for a protractor and measuring afterwards, I would recommend that you knock off 2 degrees. So if it's measuring 42, then it's about 40 degrees. Now, we don't need to be rocket science. 1 or 2 degrees either way, it doesn't matter. But ideally, make sure when you use a protractor that usually the protractor is going to read 2 to 3 degrees greater than the actual cutting edge angle. So now let's set up for negative rake scraping. So for negative rake scraping, I'm going to use this particular blade that I use inside the bowl. So it has a top angle, and what that top angle is not critical. What the bottom angle is not critical. What we want is a combined angle of less than 70. If this angle is greater than 70, the burr is too small and doesn't last too long. So I'm going to set the platform at 25 degrees for this, 25 degrees for the top, 25 degrees for the bottom. That's going to give me 50. It's going to give me a good burr. Right now I can't feel the burr on that. It's worn down from when I use it inside the bowl. So we're at 40 right now. We're going to set it to 25 for the negative rake. So I'm going to loosen this off, set at 25. Now the negative rake, as we know, don't keep the burrs very long. So I'm going to put a fresh burr on this guy all the way around. So for this, I don't need to touch the top because the top's already got the negative angle on it. And the problem with swept back negative rake scrapers for wood turners and in bowl turning is we don't ever put a burr on from the other side, have a burr in this direction, because we don't cut in this direction. We always cut in this direction. And so what we're looking to do here is simply put the burr on this side. So once this negative rake wears out, you need to re-grind that back in. This particular blade flips around, it's got one on the other side. But for now, making sure when we're ready, we're going to go all the way around in one nice smooth pass. So from here, starting on one side, bring it all the way around, nice smooth path. Maybe to make sure we got it good, we'll go one more time back. Check that you can feel the burr all the way around. We're good to go. And that's now a negative rake scraper ready to use again. You can see our even angle all the way around on the other side.